POD slash self-published authors get stigmatized, and why another reason why as a hybrid publisher we're getting around some of that stuff because we're warehoused. And so when a bookstore goes into inventory, they see 100, 200, 300, and automatically just the very essence or the fact of having inventory makes you easier for libraries and wholesalers and bookstores to get your book. But it's a perception issue, you know. So yeah, I mean, if you think about POD as a printing technology, but also as a status, it can help you negotiate things a little bit. But I do think this is actually a barrier we have to overcome as indie authors.
Can I we had Jackie, and I'm blanking on her last name, from Ingram Spark here last year, from Lightning Source.
Thompson.
And from Ingram. And she did say one of the things that they had started to do, because of exactly what you're talking about, is when folks go in to look at the page for the book from the bookstore side, at the back end, they see for a print on demand on an Ingram Spark book, at this point they see a randomized number of books in storage. So there is an inventory.
Right.
And they started doing it by having it be round numbers, and then they realized people would look at it and go, oh, that's a print on demand book.
Right.
So then they started just doing randomly between 1 and 300.
Yeah, I think that's effective. I love that they're doing that. I actually wanted to write about that, and they said I couldn't. So I'm glad she told you guys. It's a secret. No, it's good. It's good. It's an open secret, but you'll never see it in print. Maybe after, and then maybe we can move up here because there's a few.
Yeah, I am. So if David is a resident know-it-all, I'm aspiring to be the resident son of a bitch. I probably have already been in that status, I think. I don't see anybody disagree. You absolutely agree. Oh, it's not on. You didn't hear that. Can't hear it? Aha. Okay. So, did you hear me?
I did.
Good.
Yeah,
so,
son of a bitch.
I told you that because I want to ask a fairly challenging question. Or make a statement and follow up with a question. My statement is, I don't really perceive that much difference between what you're doing and a traditional publisher is doing, other than you are altering the burden of financial risk. I'm going to tell you why I think that.
Well, you're right. So
Wait, I'm going to tell you why I think that. 1, you control editing.
Right.
2, you control interior design. 3, you ultimately control cover design. 4, you require a marketing platform from the author. Now that's exactly the offer I get from a publisher of a previous book of mine, Taunton Press.
Okay.
What I would see as real, I think that's the wrong word describing what you're doing. What I would see as co-publishing is something I'm interested in trying to achieve, and I'd like to hear you instruct me on this enterprise I have in mind. That is, that I'm an author publisher. I've done the hard work of learning how to hire top-notch editors, a fabulous designer, and I'm going to build a marketing platform. What I want, what I'm seeking, what I'm already beginning to get a little bit of, is traditional publishers, Taunton Press and another company I can't mention, which is a very highly regarded local publisher, interested in taking on distribution and a good deal of the marketing, and then maybe or maybe not the manufacturing. We're still discussing that. After I achieve some success with the book, with my initial venture, which will be POD, or maybe short run offset by a Lightning Source with this new, service they're offering that I described earlier. Which, by the way, I have to quickly insert this. One thing I discovered about the people at LSI is a lot of them don't know what the hell they're doing, and the information you get may be completely wrong, and the information I passed on to you may not be valid. The rep I got it from was pretty new there, smart as hell. It's only been there a year, so you probably want to check it out for yourself. But I'm hopeful it's valid. So the question is, what do you have to say about a author publisher who's got a book ready to go, who wants that partnership with a traditional partner where they take on market penetration, warehousing, distribution, maybe or maybe not manufacturing?
Packaging.
Well, right. I mean, I'll push back to say that you're right in what you said about what we require or what we take on, except for the marketing platform. You do not need to have a platform to publish with She Writes Press, and that's one of the main reasons that I started it, because with a traditional publisher, you have to have that or you're not gonna get the deal. And so that's why the barriers to entry are as high as they are and why authors are frustrated. Like when authors say, I know I have a great book, and they're being rejected because they do not have a platform. And that is the audience that we aim to serve. So we want people to have a marketing plan or to invest in publicity, but that is different than saying that someone has to bring a platform or have, you know, some sort of marketing coming in, right? There's a difference between like paying for a publicity plan and having marketing. But what you're talking about is sort of like proving yourself through self-publishing to have a traditional publisher take you on, or to ask a traditional publisher to take on the distribution and marketing. I mean, in essence, that's what we do, you know, so you could partner with a hybrid press, for instance, who has distribution and who has, you know, the market penetration that you're talking about, and or you could approach traditional publishers. You know, like I was saying, when I was at North Atlantic, that's exactly what was happening. You know, authors were saying, I will invest, you know, X number of dollars because I want your distribution. You know, that's what you bring is your reputation and your distribution, so I'll pay for it. Lastly is, yeah, proving yourself. You know, if you self-publish and you prove that you have a book and then you want to approach whichever traditional publisher you want and say, you know, I've proven myself through self-publishing, but it's all about sales. You know, when I used to work at Sealed Press, we were acquiring self-published books, but those self-published books had to have sold a minimum of 5,000 copies. And so if you're approaching, you know, your well-regarded local publisher and you're saying, look, I did a good job, and the book sold 100 copies, they're like, well, good job. You know, keep going. So there's some stuff that you need to do to prove that, and it's not easy to get that kind of relationship that you're asking for. You know, the press that just wants to take you on to give you distribution. You know, usually your book has to fill their mission or mandate in some way. So there are ways to do it.
David over here.
A few questions, if my brain will still hold them. Is She Writes Press only for women authors and only women staffed?
Yes.
Not the only one around. Quality of Ingram print on demand,
Right.
I find, is less than Create Space.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't agree with that. I mean, I've seen some major problems with Create Space POD as well. I think it's hit or miss, and I think it depends. Of course, I've seen problems with LSI quality as well, but I think it just depends because this whole question is, you know, it's 1, it's 100, it's 300, it's whatever you order, right? So if you order 200, they're gonna be all from a particular printing plant. And one thing that I've gotten around with LSI, you know, to the other person's point about the reps not being helpful, I mean, if you're doing a lot of business with them, you can tell them, and I do, I don't want my books printed on any of the old plants. Because the newer ones, like Fresno, and, you know, they have better printing quality, and Ingram is investing in tons of new printers all the time. And so if you're, you know, a publisher doing business, you know, you have a good enough relationship with your rep, you can actually say, like, I only want my print runs done on the newer plants.
Great. And one quick one. You're using Ingram for distribution as opposed to PGW or somebody else's?
So Ingram just bought PGW.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we now have, I'm now back with my old folks at PGW. Yeah.
Up front, Barbie?
Oh, I was wondering, do you still, when a book goes back from a bookstore, is the author required or publisher required to pay shipping to and from that bookstore? That's a big.
Right. Yeah. the shipping costs. I mean, they're bulk shipping. You know, I mean, usually what will happen is a bookstore puts all of the Ingram stuff onto huge pallets, and then it takes this giant truck back to Ingram. So you're not paying like, you know, a UPS cost. but you are charged all kinds of shipping costs, yeah.
A quick question about the actual percentage, and you said it was 60-40, but the author has to print their own books. They pay for the
They
print.
pay for the printing,
Okay,
right?
so if an author is using the book on their speaking engagements to sell in the back, do you take a percentage of those books?
We do not, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, for us, I explicitly recommend that the author sell books that way, because it's a great way, if you consider our, hypothetical $20 scenario, and the price per unit is $20, and you're gonna, 20, and the price for manufacturing is like $2, let's say, then you're making an $18 profit. That's great. And lots of authors also are doing direct sales. So we have some authors, for instance, that are sold to a corporate company. But when they're selling to corporate or to whoever, you're usually giving a discount. You're not selling at list price. You would want to be giving them like I give a bulk discount of 50% to any individual or company that orders 10 or more of my book. So that means that my $16.95 book is then, $8.95 or whatever, and then I have to subtract printing costs. But we encourage our authors to do direct sales, and we take ourselves out as the middle person.
So do you take that receipt and say, I just printed up 300 books, and is that receipt that says 300 books used as part of that?
Okay, I'm sorry. The question is, if a person prints up 300 books to sell on their own time in their own place, do you take the receipt from the printing press and says 300 books were printed? So you gave a list of, like, I think you said 5,000 books, you've done something. So does that receipt actually say, okay, this is, and you add up all of your receipts? Yeah.
Right, yes, it counts toward your total sales, but it doesn't mean that the industry can see that. Right, so because the industry measures book sales through BookScan, and BookScan is not even comprehensive. So when you approach a traditional, the problem is I hear people all the time saying, I've sold 40,000, I've sold 50,000, and I'll talk to them and I say, well, how many of those are ebooks? 39,800, right? Because they're doing things where they're like giving away their book for free, they're doing book bubs, they're pricing their books at 99 cents. And that does not mean that you sold 40,000 books to the industry. It might mean that you think you sold 40,000. The industry is not counting these like loss leader. So how the industry counts, like I used to get proposals where people would say, if I've sold, kind of through traditional markets 1,000 copies, and I speak a lot, and I have sold 5,000 copies on my own. And that is great, and it's impressive, because publishers also love people who are selling their own books at the back of the room. If that's you, however, I would ask you, why would you traditionally publish? Because the traditional publishers are going to take your money. They are not going to cut out the middle person, i.e. themselves. They'll be like, oh great, you want to sell your book at the back of the room? You pay us 50% for your book. And you're like, why would you do that? So if for people who are very entrepreneurial and who are speaking all over the place, you're a perfect candidate for self-publishing. Cut out everyone. The only reason to have a traditional publisher or a hybrid publisher, in my opinion, is because you want a partner, who's going to help you do it better, and or you want traditional distribution. But if your whole business plan is like, I speak everywhere and I sell my book directly, those people should self-publish with the help of a professional who's going to help them do it really well.
Okay, next question is from Carol.
Yes, on the $20 scenario, I believe you said you'll have, after the 55%, there's $9 left, and that is split between you and the author.
Right.
And out of that, so that leaves $4.50 for the author, and out of that comes the printing costs and the fees. So that doesn't sound like there's more than $1 or so left, not 18.
if it's $9, isn't it $5.50 to the author? The author gets 60.
Half of $9 is $4.50.
Right, so
60%, not half.
they get 60. So it's 5, let's call it 5, just for the sake of calling it something. And then, yeah, you have to take out your costs, which is, let's say it's $2, but sometimes it's $3. So you're left with like $2 to $3 per unit.
You said something about fees.
Well, no, there is a returns processing fee of 50 cents per unit. The most I've ever seen an author pay on returns processing fees is $40. So that's not a lot. So yeah, you're talking about earning $2 to $3 per unit through our model, and we have this all on our website. You know, I mean, people can look and see exactly how this breaks down. But in traditional publishing, you get less than $1 per unit after you earn out your royalties. So yeah, no, you're not going to make a lot of money. This is the thing, like you guys know, if you're a publisher, like this is not a good business. It's worse for authors, you know. And so, like when people are like, "Oh, I'm only going to make," I'm like, "Yeah, that's, you know, the one thing we should consider doing is raising the prices per unit of all of the books, you know. But the market only bears what it bears." And so in some cases, I'm telling my authors, well, let's charge $17.95 or $18.95, but then I go to PGW and they're like, actually, this book should be $16. You know, so they're kind of also pushing, you know, it's interesting, when I was a kid, books were probably like $12, right? Now they're $15. But when I was a kid, the movies were like $5, and now they're $15. And so there's an interesting thing happening with books, where the intellectual value of books is just staying stagnant or like just not good. And it's a problem in the industry. It's like, well, why do we devalue books this much? This is just like a total side note on your question. But like, we're not making good money. And there are more people entering this marketplace, and like this publisher's struggling to figure out how to survive. So it's hard.
Well, can I finish my question? I don't believe you told us how much it costs to engage your assistants to join your group.
Yeah.
And how much then for this first $1,000 print? So what would be the
We
cost?
charge $5,900, and so that is our cost. And you guys, when you're figuring out your own models, should figure out what price point feels comfortable to you. It started at $3,900, and what happened for us is that we're spending $1,000 on covers alone. And we're doing editorial. You know, it's like we weren't making any money. We were losing money at $3,900. So now we charge $5,900. We include all kinds of stuff in that. You know, not like it includes a proofread, the interior, blah blah blah. You know, I mean, a long list of stuff, including our distribution. But not everyone could get away with charging that. And there are also lots, like Greenleaf, for instance, is another hybrid press that charges like $15,000. You know, so the range of costs is quite dramatic.
But that doesn't include the cost of printing, right?
It doesn't include printing.
So what does it cost to print 1,000 books?
It just depends on how long your book is, right? I mean, if you have a short book, per trim size, but I tell authors to think about like setting aside $2,000 to $3,000 for their print run, but it's clearly going to be less if it's 500 and more if it's 5,000, right? I mean, it's a per unit cost, yeah.
Now, I have a question that kind of follows up on exactly what we were just talking about. Some of our people are listening to you as publishers who are interested in.
Right.
I'm one of those, and I'm realizing some of what I'm doing is basically hybrid publishing.
Right.
So, but a lot of our folks are folks who are sitting at the crux, am I going to self-publish, am I going to go with them? And what I want to ask you is, how do they distinguish between a legitimate hybrid publisher and, say, Author House, which is
Right.
press? What is the distinction aside from cost?
That's exactly the point that I was making earlier when IBPA, so I'm the chair of the advocacy committee for the Independent Book Publishers Association, and we are right now putting together a list of things that qualify as a hybrid press for the purpose of differentiating it from a vanity. And so the things that I mentioned earlier, some of them being, you know, sort of intellectual things, right? I mean, like that you are a publisher and you have a publishing mission, that you curate or vet your projects in some way, that you deem and take responsibility for the notion that your books are published ready, that there be some form of active distribution. And that, you know, and that there be some sort of, like if it's a pay for service kind of thing, that the royalties be higher. And we have said they need to be at 50% or higher to the author. And I think that's really important, because if you're paying and then you have like a really low royalty, you're essentially paying the publisher.
That's 50% of the net, of your net receipts.
Right, or more to the author. And then also, I mean, I think that honestly, in my opinion, curation is the biggest thing. Because a vanity press publishes anything. And that was the point that I was making earlier. If you guys want to move from, oh, hey, I'm just an author and I want to pay you, you know, $3,000 to help me publish my book, and you don't care what their content is, and that's fine. You know, I mean, you can make it look better, right? But as a publisher and as a hybrid publisher, I think you have to take a vested interest in the content and the quality of the project, and that's really the primary differentiator. And then obviously, like places like Author House are predatory. I don't know the way to, you know, exactly. It's hard when you're putting out qualifiers, but I think another important thing is that, like, transparency, and you know that authors can speak to the publisher. You know, lots of things like that. But that's more just things to look out for as an author.
And we have our last question here, I'm afraid. I'm so sorry.
So following up on David Concar's question about She Writes Press, what is Spark Press?
Yeah, so Spark Press, this is just a quick little history of our company. So I started She Writes Press 5.5 years ago, and 3 years ago we merged with another company who brought Spark Press to the table. And so Crystal, who is our CEO now, basically had this imprint that she didn't want to run anymore, and she acquired She Writes and She Writes Press, and so I became publisher of both imprints at that time. So for 3 years I've been overseeing both imprints, and Spark Press publishes many fewer books, in part just because it doesn't have the visibility, but Spark Press does publish men, and it is a little more commercially focused. It does much, like almost exclusively fiction, although there's a few places where that's not the case. And if you look at it, you'll see, I mean, it's a lot of genre fiction, science fiction, fantasy, and like very, what I call like the glossy, you know, commercial women's fiction.
It's the same model.
It's the same exact model, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Brooke. Thank you so much for your wonderful answers. We will be reconvening at 1 o'clock, and also our low-key co-celebration here while we're talking about co-publishing. Come on up and enjoy and share some holiday cheer.
Excuse me.
And if you haven't signed up for the afternoon, now is a great time to come up to the desk and we will help you register.
So, this is one of the best presentations I've heard on this subject.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I've been coming to this for 4 years. Don't take it lightly.
Thank you.
The second thing is I definitely need your card.
I need to go get it out of the car. Let me go grab it.
Just gonna give it
I left my card.
This is your phone. What is it for?
Hi, Peter.
wanted to give you
Yeah,
my card.
yeah, it's good to see you again. I remember
Beautiful.
you. Thank you.
Yeah, all right.
No, I'm not gonna leave right now.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to the car with it. I left it in my other bag. So let me go.
No, I wanna hang around a little bit. Or
Yeah,
you-
but I'm not here for the,
No, I'm not either.
Sure.
But since they're having an after thing, I'm gonna visit the ladies' room and sit, you know, a bit, do a bit.
don't buy it. You can borrow it. Everything's $15.
Several months ago, your name disappeared off.
I can read that.
Yeah, a number of my clients are working. Yeah.